Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Miss Meyer Show, your favorite show in the world, right? Which you wait all week to watch. So today we're going to continue to talk about Louisiana in the New South and how we were moving forward and changing things. Remember, Reconstruction has long been over, and now the new people, the new redeemers, are trying to redeem the South and trying to kind of create a new Louisiana and a new South as a whole. So last time episode, I think we talked about the hospitals, about education, a little bit about education. We talked about the prison system, all those kinds of things. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about education. And let me see what else we're going to hit on. We're going to get to education and the conservation movement. So that's what we're going to cover today. So the first thing about the education movement that we're going to talk about is the changes in the State Board of Education. Now, Louisiana, we're known pretty much for corruption. We really are. I mean, anybody talks about Louisiana politics, the thing that they're going to think about the most is, Edwin Edwards and Huey Long and, all those other kinds of people. So we're pretty much known for that. Thank you if you said bless you. Okay, so our State Board of Education was not exempt from this corruption. There was a lot of corruption. It didn't matter if you were an educator or you knew a lot about your job. The way to get on with the State Board of Education was really based on who you knew. Well, during the New South, Louisiana began to improve when the legislature created the State Board of Education and a local parish school board. It took it away from people who were just there, because they were friends with so-and-so, and it gave them to people who actually knew what they were doing. Governor Blanchard doubled the education budget. He built new schools. He required that parish superintendents become certified. He changed the way the parish school board members were chosen. There were now elections rather than appointed. So he really revamped the school system, the public school system. And while there were lots of people who said, this is a great idea, we have new schools and we have people working in these schools that know what they're doing and we've got all of these new things here, there were people that were against it and that said that this is too much, because with this public education and these changes, someone has to pay for it. Someone has to, foot the bill to make these changes for these new school programs. And those people were the taxpayers. Now, the majority of people in Louisiana were not super rich. They didn't have a lot of money to pay tax. And by doing this, Blanchard had to kind of raise the taxes. He had to make people pay a little bit more. And then the majority of people in Louisiana couldn't afford to pay a little bit more. This is the time period right before the 1900s. There were no social programs. You didn't have enough money to buy food or enough money to, heat your house. That was it. Could not go. There was no program out to help you. So by taxing them a little bit more, you're taking even more away from these people, and they have very little at all to begin with. So while you do have people that are saying this is a great idea, and it was a good idea because Louisiana was towards the bottom when it fell with education, you also have people saying this isn't that great of an idea. I can't afford to do this. Your poor farmers in Louisiana, the majority of them didn't even send their kids to school. Their sons went to school maybe till about 8 or 9, and then they were needed back on the farm. Girls probably didn't go at all. So it depended on, how much money, the way you looked at this education movement kind of depended on if you were wealthy, if you had were you know where you lived, things like that. It was different. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is higher education. Now, what higher education is, and I'm sorry, I keep moving the board. Higher education, the screen, and I don't know what this. You see how it's whatever glare? I don't know where it's coming from. I think it's this window above me. And look at this, guys. I'll show you this. I gave myself a black eye. Can you see this? Right here. That's my black eye. I gave it to myself. I'll tell you how I gave myself a black eye at the end of class. But I've got into a fight with a Kentwood jug. And I got this. All right. So we're going to talk about higher education in Louisiana. What higher education is, it's college, education beyond high school, things like that. And in Louisiana, we didn't have a ton of schools. We didn't have a ton of places of higher education that were around. Now, during the New South period, the state's higher education system improved as well. They started creating regional colleges. There were colleges in New Orleans, and I believe there was one in Shreveport as well, but the people in between Shreveport and New Orleans, they didn't have it. There was no college for them to go to. And so we start seeing during this time rural colleges, little colleges that were popping up between between New Orleans and Shreveport. Some colleges that were created during this time were LSU was created. And H. Sophie Newcomb was opened in Tulane, which is in New Orleans, and that was a women's college because majority of women did not go to college. They did not. They didn't even go to school a lot of the times. So they had their own specific university. We also see during this time public education increasing for African Americans. This was the South. It's right after the Civil War, Reconstruction's over. There's lots of segregation. We talked about the Jim Crow laws. Lots of segregation. So while you had these universities, Tulane and LSU and all these other places, they were not open to African Americans. They were not available to go there. So we see a woman by the name of Catherine Drexel. She was a Catholic nun, and she worked to open up a university specifically for African Americans, because during this time the African American illiteracy rate, meaning the percentage of African Americans that could not read, was 70% in Louisiana, and something had to be done about it. Right after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, there were a ton of people doing stuff about it, but when Reconstruction was over, when we were no longer a military district, we see kind of slipping back, and there weren't a lot of opportunities. Catherine Drexel wanted to change that, and she created Xavier University, which is a beautiful university in New Orleans. If you guys ever, when you graduate, you want to go check out schools, it's a really good school, and it's got a great pharmacy program if anybody wants to be a pharmacist. Also, a man by the name of P.B.S. Pinchback. He lobbied, and successfully, I might add, for another college for African American college. He opened up a new school in New Orleans with about 12 students and 5 faculty members. He created Southern University, or as it's known today as SUNO, and in 1901 Grambling University was established. So we do see lots of schools opening up for African Americans, African American males, I might add. The females weren't invited too much at the time. Okay. Next, what we're going to talk about is our economy. What was going on in Louisiana during this time. And what an economy is, it's basically how we were making money, how money was being processed, how we were financing new roads and schools and things like that. Now, Louisiana's economy has always been based on agriculture. Even today, the majority of our funding is from agriculture. We do see, some shipping, especially like in the New Orleans area, and now we have a lot with films, lots of films. There's films being filmed here. There's one like down the street from me. I see with all the signs where how they have the signs with the little arrows pointing this way. I don't know. If you live in New Orleans, you know what I'm talking about. They're all over. And they make a big hassle for anyone who's trying to drive. And I don't drive well to begin with, so it already creates a big problem for me. All right. So what we're going to talk about is our modernizing economy. It was a huge modern era. But to us, it doesn't seem modern. But in 1901, which is the time we're pretty much talking about, this was huge. So one of the great goals of this new South and of Louisiana was to increase business and industry. Even though we were mainly agricultural, we knew that the big dollars were being made by industry, by manufacturing, by plants and not plants like flowers and stuff, plants like factory plants. That's where you made your big money. And what really made this apparent to Louisiana was how the North pretty much cut us off during the Civil War. We didn't have any of those manufacturing places here in the South. We had all the crops and things like that. So during the Civil War, we were completely cut out. So the South in Louisiana wanted to focus on getting more business here in our state, making money that way. Okay? We see they try to do this by using new inventions and new technologies and crazy things like that. So that's one of the things that they were trying to do. Even today, you might hear that Louisiana is trying to bring, different businesses here. We're trying to attract different businesses because those businesses make us money. I remember when I was a little girl, there was a big thing about bringing the casinos here. That's what Edwin Edwards, which we'll talk about later, brought casinos here. That was a big industry, made us a lot of money, continues to do so. Other industries, the film industry, that was brought here. It's making us a lot of money. So we are constantly moving forward. Even though we are agricultural, we're sportsman's paradise, you still know that the big bucks are with industry. Okay? Now, like I said, we basically really focus and our economy depends largely on agriculture. And the traditional crops that we grow here in Louisiana are cotton, sugarcane, rice, and corn. Those are our major crops. And in fact, my dad works for a factory that processes sugar because, here we are in Louisiana. It's a big thing. More than 1/4 of all Louisiana farmers who work the land were pretty much sharecroppers. And we talked about sharecropping before. And I'm going to try to find a video about sharecropping and link it here.
Florida.
And I learned a lot of them on.
She refuses to sit down. Lila wakes up as early as 5 a.m. and begins her day around 6. Shortly after sunrise, she is already in her yard feeding her pets and cultivating her crops.
I'm making a pulled pie. Now the hood, cabbage leaf, and
Since early childhood, crops have been a part of Lila's life.
And collard leaf, and
Before her 50-year stint in the service industry, Lila lived her life as a sharecropper.
a opposing power for allow you breathe and be.
Perhaps her routine is nothing short of second nature. About 27 miles east of Dothan, Alabama, her family were tenants on a farm owned by John Crooks, a white Southern farmer. Lila was born to a family of 12 children. As each sibling grew to the age of 8, they would have to work alongside their mother and father from sun-up to sundown harvesting crops. In theory, the tenant farmers were to be compensated for the crops they harvested and picked. In reality, that was rarely the case. The system of sharecropping formed shortly after the Civil War, and the Emancipation Proclamation freed Southern slaves. From the end of the war up until the late 1890s, Southern states had no official public policy on labor or where African Americans should fall in the labor system. Southern farmers were in desperate need of a new society of agricultural earnings that didn't include free labor. Northern workers were fearful of competition with newly freed slaves for work, and Northern capitalists saw the need for continued cotton production. As a result, African Americans, along with the poor, were coerced virtually into re-enslavement.
The oppressor almost never abandons the oppression. They move from one form of oppression to another form of oppression.
There is a serious collapse of social structure. And sharecropping came out of that, and so what happened was, wealthy people offered a certain amount of land to people that had worked for them for free, but with a catch, of course, and the catch was to keep working because they needed that labor.
While some left the South for a chance at more industrial jobs in the North, most Southerners were a rural people who felt land was vital. The planter class dominated the South. Developing land was what they did.
Just because on paper people were granted some new privileges didn't mean that they changed that much psychologically, because they were conditioned to be dependent. They were conditioned to letting other people make decisions for them. They were conditioned basically to being provided for.
Morning before the sunrise, get a little breakfast and go on until lunch, and come here and get a dinner before we could eat, and go back 1 o'clock, go back to the field till the sundown, and you'll be something whole year round in that field.
Augustine Johnson, a former sharecropper and neighbor to Lila Fetts, continues to live as a resident of Macon, Georgia. She remembers all too well the long hours invested working the fields.
The meals will start from December and open till January and February time to plant. They would be done broke the land. They didn't have tractors like they had now. They break the land. They had mules.
Lila and her siblings only attended school 4 months out of the year. According to her, John Crooks required every member of her family to help harvest the crop. During the harvest season, Lila and her siblings would have to leave school for months to pick what they called the money crops: cotton, corn, and peanuts.
We didn't go to school until about November.
After slavery, freedmen expected 40 acres and a mule, but had to settle for a portion of a farmer's land. No serious or immediate action was taken on the part of the government to compensate African Americans for generations of unpaid labor.
They did not recognize that their real situation was that they had been put into a disguised form, another form of servitude, and as long as they didn't see their condition as a continuous servitude, they would regard that as a good for them.
The federally run Freedmen's Bureau convinced freedmen to sign labor contracts with plantation owners. While these contracts were presented as a fair agreement between a landowner and tenant farmer, laws known as the Black Code's pigeon held African Americans to a position of social and economic inferiority.
And if we didn't get up, Paul would grab us by the foot and pull us out on the floor. We had to get up. When he said get up, you had to get up.
The Black Codes were discriminatory laws passed on the state and local level that limited the civil rights and liberties of the black and poor by controlling their labor, movement, and activities. Southern governments adopted vagrancy laws, anti-enticement codes, and a crop lien system trapped African Americans into a sharecropping system. The crop lien system in particular created a cycle of poverty.
Sometimes we wait late and
Okay. Sharecropping made it a huge gap between the rich and the poor farmers. There was no real, at this time, there was no real middle class. You were either rich or you were poor. There were no middle class citizens. But during the South, we start to see lots of changes in agriculture as well. This new South period was kind of characterized by new inventions and new industry just as much as it was anything else. And we start to see farmers starting to notice that we've got to do things a little differently. With the sharecropping and with the way that they were working the fields, the farmers were starting to see that their soil was being depleted. They were not using effective farming methods. The soil was not as rich in its nutrient, and they weren't producing as much crops. So the big farmers saying, we need to find a way to nourish our soil, to get our crops where they need to be. So we see a huge invention in new farm equipment, steam-powered machinery, irrigation canals, new tractors that would dig up the soil and make it more nutrient rich. We start seeing ideas on how to fertilize soil so we get better crops. So during this time, this New South time, we see not only new inventions with industry, but new inventions and ideas with agriculture as well. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next time is the conservation movement, sulfur, timber, oil, and all those other kinds of things. We're probably going to just do that next time because this one took a lot longer than I thought. So I will tell you how I got my black eye. Where's my black eye? See my black eye? I have a Kentwood jug dispenser in my dining room, and my husband usually switches that out. Well, he was at work and there was no more water, and I wanted some water. I was thirsty, you know. I'm training for this marathon. I want to get all this water in. So I go to the jug, and I have to take the old jug out to put the new jug in. So I try to pull the old jug, and I'm pulling it. I'm like pulling it. It won't come out. So I'm like, oh, I gotta pull harder. So I prop my leg up on the dispenser to get some leverage, and I was just pulling it, and pow! It came out and hit me right in the eye. Right here in the eye. That's why I got this black eye. And it's I have like concealer on right now, so it's not as bad. But like when I don't have makeup on, you know, it looks horrible. It's all black. Oh my gosh. So so you guys, that's why I have a black eye, and you might see on Tuesday, because you know I don't wear makeup to our Class Connect sessions, you'll definitely see this black eye. So you guys, I will talk to you later on the next episode, and have a great day. See you later. So there were 2 corn dogs up here that were left. When we came home, this is what we see. So I think the culprit is hiding. Beast! So go see. I think he's the culprit. Call him out here.
Come on. Come on, back. Come on. Did you do that? Huh? Did you do that? No. Come here. Come here. Did you do that? Huh? Wait, no, where you going? Hey. Hey. I smell hot dog on your breath. Did you do that? Hey. Hey, look. Did you do that?
So what is the moral of the story? Don't do stuff you're not supposed to do.
Peace. Come here.
He's gonna go hide.